These are the headquarters of the Daily Express newspaper, a long-standing proponent of xenophobic fervour and advocate of healthy eating. Today the Express will be read by nearly 500,000 people, but this wasn't always the case. The man who brought the paper into mass circulation was Max Aitken I, better known as the Right Honourable Lord Beaverbrook. He was also a politician, a patron of war artists, and a close friend of Winston Churchill. This is a film about his life and legacy. In 1918, Beaverbrook led the formation of the British War Memorials Committee, which oversaw the construction of the Royal Artillery Memorial. Benedict Anderson wrote that no more arresting emblems of nationalism exist than cenotaphs and tombs of unknown soldiers. Imagine the reaction to the busybody who discovered the unknown soldier's name, or insisted on filling the cenotaph with some real bones. Human remains are unsavoury. The nation-state is immortal. Despite being a public figure, many of Beaverbrook's idiosyncrasies were only disclosed to the readership of the Express indirectly. However, an interview with Fleet Street editor Bob Edwards captured a snapshot of his personal life.
So I went to see Beaverbrook at his country house, Cherkley, Leatherhead, Surrey. He sort of had more or less lived in a park, as far as I could see. It was a huge house, rather pleasantly shabby, full of very good paintings. He was wild about the painter Stubbs, so there were horses everywhere. So my first meeting with this wicked Baron, the first Baron Beaverbrook, and the last Baron Beaverbrook, as Max Aitken, his son, said, there'll only be one Lord Beaverbrook. I was in some enormous living room, the drawing room, I suppose, waiting to see this chap, and of course I wasn't the least bit scared, because what the hell? And the enormous door opened, and there he was standing. And people always said he was a little man, but he never seemed to be little. He had an enormous presence. And he stood there, and he said, "You must be Mr. Edwards." And he was holding his hand in a curious way. And so he came towards me, and I stood up, obviously, and he said, "I'd like to shake you by the hand, Mr. Edwards, but I can't." I'm doing my best to imitate his accent. I can't, he said, because my hand, and he opened his hand dramatically, is full of worms. And indeed his hand was full of worms. What an entrance, he was a great performer. Well, instantly I thought, gosh, this is an amusing fellow, Well, I knew he was, from repute, as it were. And he said, scoring point number 2 coming up, he said, "I have to feed the fish that Churchill gave me." So would you like to come into the garden? So into the garden I went with Beaverbrook, and there were these enormous fish swimming around in some ornamental pond of great size, And he threw the worms in. He'd lost interest in this story after that. And that was the end of that performance. And I thought, well, very good. If I ever write memoirs, it'll look rather good in my memoirs. Anyway, perhaps I didn't think that. And then we walked across this enormous lawn. He said, "I like to have a walk, I walk for an hour every day. Do you mind having a walk with the old man?" And so I said, "With that old man, of course, I'm sure I was on to sir by then." And we walked for quite a long way, and he was chatting non-stop, And I can't remember what we were talking about, but it was all very genial, pleasant. And he said, "One of the awful things about being an old man is you have to make water, Mr. Edwards." So he duly did so on his lawn in front of his enormous house. So I thought, that's interesting. Years later, I understood how justified he was.
Chirkley was the crucible in which Beaverbrook galvanised his views. Amongst his strongest were those that pertained to a decent diet. Covet the horse and eat the fish, but know that the fish has been eating worms. He who has the indignity to eat the horse or the worms is a savage. After Beaverbrook's death, his effigies lost their appetite entirely. The 5-second rule ceases to apply for the immortalised. Their noses are upturned indefinitely. Standing amidst the monuments of central London, the feeling of being watched is overwhelming. People hide to eat their lunches. This man was so overwhelmed by the eminence of the Royal Artillery Memorial that he passed out from hunger. Over the course of Lord Beaverbrook's life, he worked to leave his legacy firmly embedded in national tastes. The boardrooms of the Express are not open to the public. We cannot know for certain whether Beaverbrook's views are still taken as gospel. At the very least, the might of his voice is sustained, in the serifs and capitals of newspaper headlines. The louder you shout, the more truthful your disgust becomes.